this computer. Okay, I think it's recording now. So hi everyone, welcome to the Black and Mental Health panel. Today we are going to be talking about different mental health pathways and careers. So this panel is a little different than how we did it last year. This year it's going to be pre-recorded, and so you all will see it live on September 21st at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. And yeah, so I want to welcome you all to our live Pathways panel. My name is Tanisha Johnson. I am a clinical psychology doctoral student at St. Louis University, and then I'll have our other panelists introduce themselves. Starting with Dr. Dixon.
Hey y'all, my name is Brian Dixon. I am a child and adolescent and adult psychiatrist down in Fort Worth, Texas. I'm super proud to be here, and I look forward to sharing about entrepreneurship as well as medicine.
Cool. Miss Regina?
Yes, hello. My name is Regina Stone Grover, and I am a psychologist. And I work specifically with poetry and processing in Michigan. Thank you.
Dr. Essence?
Yes, my name is Dr. Essence Rivers. I am a postdoctoral psychology fellow down in Palm Beach County in Florida. Most of my work is done with families, and I do a lot of presentations and speaking about trauma, community violence, and family structure and functioning.
Awesome. We also have Manny Jade Garcia interpreting for us today, and we hope that you enjoy this panel. So the first question is how you got into your field, what your field really looks like for you, and sort of your space in Black and mental health. And so does anybody particularly want to go first, or I can just call names again? Okay, I can call names. Miss Regina, could you go first?
Sure. So as far as working with poetry and processing, I actually have been writing poetry throughout my life. But when I went into grad school, what ultimately happened was I needed to center. And because grad school has a tendency to be a heavier load and I was dealing with some particular things, I began to do a lot of work in the community with poetry, writing, and literacy. And what I found was I really enjoyed it. So I actually incorporated it into my internship, working with youth and adjudicated youth who were also dealing with treatment and then also working in the community. So I found that to be a very strong space for me. I appreciated what it did for people, and it opened up doors that I'm now pursuing as far as being able to offer poetry and processing.
Awesome. Dr. Essence?
Yeah, so I actually grew up as the child of a psychologist in training. So my first day of school ever in kindergarten, my dad started his doctoral program. And so during that time, he practiced a lot of assessments and different things on me, which let me kind of see what the world of psychology looked like before I got into it. And I was like, I think that's what I want to do. And so I majored in psychology in college and then started a graduate program. And I did a lot of different work, but it was always with children and like adolescents. And once I got into residential treatment, that's when it really opened my eyes to the importance of looking at like a systemic framework. Um, I would work with kids that were adjudicated as well, like Regina, or had just significant mental health concerns, and they would do really well in treatment and then really poorly when they left. And I was really concerned, what is this? Why is this happening? And so talking through just with different supervisors, I realized that we really have to address the system. We have to address families. We can't just look at an individual. And so that's what initially got me into family therapy, looking at supporting families and making change within the family. And then also looking at addressing mental health on a more systemic level in the country and everything as well.
Awesome. Okay. Dr. Dixon?
Yeah, so I love it. So I too work with adjudicated youth, and I can't wait. This is like heaven to me to work with so many psychologists and therapists. And so for me, my path was a little bit different. I went to medical school. So after undergrad, I did my bachelor's in psychology. I went to medical school, and in medical school, I actually thought I was going to become a family physician, but I did the rotation, and I realized that they don't have as much time to talk to people as I like. And so I went into psychiatry. And to make a long story short, I eventually got a job out of fellowship, and I was thinking that that was going to be what I did for the rest of my life until I realized that I'm a really, really bad employee. So I don't like people telling me what to do. And so quit that job, started my own practice. And since then, I've been working a lot in the entrepreneurship side of things, especially for African Americans. I think that entrepreneurship is our path to kind of Black excellence and recovering our strength and our power. And so, so I work in that arena. I still see patients. I still work with families. And then I work a lot with financial disparities. So the way that our healthcare system is funded is really dumb. And as a result, a lot of the clinicians that deserve the financial support, like therapists, are not paid at the same rate as other folks. And so I'm working very diligently to bring awareness and to correct that disparity.
Awesome. There are so many cool things you can do in mental health space. So my first, I guess, official question outside of what you all do is what sort of drove you to want to start working in mental health? Like, was there a pivotal moment for you, or was there sort of like over time you were like, man, this is kind of what I want to do? So I think we'll start with Dr. Dixon since you're the last one.
Yeah, so it was a kind of combination of both. So I knew that I wanted to be a doctor. I didn't know that I wanted to do psychiatry until I did my rotation in psychiatry, and I was lucky to do child psychiatry for 3 weeks. And that just opened my eyes to the importance of dynamics, so the relationship between different people. And then I'm a firm believer that children are our future. I would sing, but I don't know how well that would go today. And so investing, and research is showing that early childhood investment, so when we invest in early childhood interventions and education, it's a 3 to 4-fold return on those investments. And so I want to make sure that for families, for kids, that they get the best mental health possible. And so, yeah, so it was kind of a slow maturation process for me.
Dr. Essence? Oh, she might be frozen. So we'll go to Miss Regina.
Well, I guess when I first started, I knew about when I was a teenager. I actually had a parent murdered, and that was when I began to recognize and understand that trauma, issues like we talk about adverse childhood experiences, have a huge impact on how far children can go and what children can do. And so that was pretty much a pivotal moment when I realized that um, I was susceptible to being impacted and things there. This was a turning point in my life. So if this is the way that my life can be changed, then this is an opportunity um, for me to be able to step into a space and change the lives of others. And that was really what started everything for me.
Dr. Essence?
I'm trying to think. So I think for me, there was never this like moment where I was like, oh, that's what I want to do. It was just kind of like the natural pathway for me. Like I really love people and I really connect on relationship basis. And I've seen relationships change lives. Even as a child, like being somebody that was really compassionate and empathic, I would see kids that it seemed like they had harder lives or they didn't have as many friends. And I was often drawn to those kids to just kind of hear their story and be friends with them. My dad, before he was a psychologist, was a social worker, and my mom worked in a pretty urban school district as a teacher. And so I was raised just in the business of helping people, and it was kind of the natural step for me. I think the only thing that was kind of a switch for me is I always thought I wanted to work with really young children. Like I was like, I want to impact their lives really young when they're early. And when I went to grad school, I didn't really have the opportunity to work with young children. I started working with teenagers. And I was like, I'm not going to work with teenagers. They have a bad attitude. I want nothing to do with teenagers. And I fell in love with working with teenagers. I think like it's one of the biggest, hardest times of our lives. And I underestimated the impact that I could have with anywhere from like 11 to 16-year olds was like, wow. And so that was something that was unexpected in the work that I'm doing now with that age group. I think that was definitely something I was always called to do. I just had to catch up with what my purpose was.
That is so cool. So I also realized that I didn't answer any of those questions about myself. So I am in a clinical psychology doctoral program. I also love working with kids. I like to work with school age kids the most because I really like interacting with parents and making parents feel like they can enjoy their kids again. Because sometimes when kids have mental health concerns, parents feel very stressed out and frustrated, like why does my kid do this, or why aren't they doing what I expect them to do? And so that's really sort of my bread and butter right now. And I think what drove me to being in mental health was I just sort of, like Dr. Essence said, like sort of had this natural, really like drawn to people sort of aura. And so people would always come to me with their stories, even in the grocery stores. Like I remember being 11 and like people just pouring their hearts out to me in the grocery store. And so it kind of just like, I was like, oh, I need to help people for like, that's my life purpose. And so that's sort of how I got into mental health. Um, and yeah, so our next question is, what are some of the roadblocks or hiccups that you've encountered on your journey to serving others through mental health? And so let's start with Dr. Regina.
Well, some of the roadblocks, there have been many. Adverse childhood experiences has been a few. I would say that one of the biggest challenges that I've had has been systemic, due to I'm not sure how familiar people are, and racism is an issue across the country, but specifically in Michigan, there are some very strong supports and reinforcements for racial barriers. And so learning how to kind of navigate them and to maintain stabilization, um, especially because there's also classism that takes place and it overlaps. And so learning how to maintain and remain stabilized through a lot of those types of barriers can be a very huge challenge to navigate through.
Dr. Essence?
I think on a personal level, I encountered a lot of roadblocks, particularly through graduate school. So I was a gifted kid, and so school was always, pretty easy. And I was actually diagnosed with ADHD my first year in graduate school, because I was like, why am I not getting this? What is different about this? And so my own mental health has been one of those things that's difficult. I also started graduate school younger than a lot of people. So I was 19 when I started my doctorate program. And my cohort would have opportunities where they would all go out to like the bar or go bond or something like that, and I was too young to get in, and to do those things. And I think graduate school is already a pretty isolating experience because you're so focused on working on papers or reading or studying or whatever. But I think that isolation, being away from home, being younger than a lot of my classmates, and those kinds of things were also really difficult. I would also say just like support on a personal level is really important, but also within your program or within your training. And I had some really great supervision experiences, and I also had some supervision experiences that were really hard. That there were times where I didn't feel supported, where I didn't feel understood. And I think that that was kind of my biggest takeaway throughout my training has been when you have support, when you have people that believe in you, when you have people that get you. My training was like night and day. So I think not having those things at points in time, that was one of the biggest roadblocks, I think on a more personal level.
Yeah, I'd say personally, so I grew up, I'm from East Texas, and most folks probably don't know anything about East Texas, but it's pretty kind of impoverished depending on where you are. And so we grew up on food stamps, and I know how to stretch a dollar and the whole 9 yards. But that those early childhood adverse childhood events played a huge role in kind of shaping who I am. And that led directly into kind of the economic inequities and inequalities, and so which I experienced once I became an attending, and I realized that I was making less money. And when I looked backwards, I could see where all of these times were occurring when I wasn't getting paid my worth, or I was having to pay the black tax, right, where I have to work, twice as hard to get half as far. And so speaking about those things can make you very unpopular, and being a psychiatrist itself can make you very unpopular because there's a lot of stigma within the medical profession about who we are and what we do. And so, yeah, all of those things kind of compound on each other to make it, to kind of make me a unicorn in a sense, because there aren't very many folks out there to lend mentorship. And so I just kind of have to sometimes just make things up as I go along. And it can be very, very lonely. Because the other part is I'm in private practice, which means I'm responsible for everything. I have to do sales and marketing and operations and financials and run the whole ship. And I have employees, and some of my employed counterparts don't understand how I do what I do. So yeah, so lots of kind of personal and systemic roadblocks and hiccups, but I have the best job in the world. Like I would not trade this for anything.
Yeah, I would say sort of for me, one of the biggest roadblocks was one, like getting out of my way, my own way, and then two, like learning how to ask for help and learning how to lean on people. Because I feel like a lot of getting into grad school was, based off of who you know, or like if you have publications, or based off of like your experiences and who you've worked with before. And so for me, that was sort of like a huge roadblock because I didn't know any clinical psychologists. I think there was one in our program and she wasn't practicing, and she did like a PsyD over the PhD. And so like she didn't have exactly the wherewithal, that's not the right word, but she didn't have exactly like the experience that I was looking for and needed to like help me get to grad school, because she sort of had a very different trajectory on how she got there. And so going back to the first point of like getting out of my own way, my own self-esteem of like, can I really do this? Am I going to be successful in this? Like, are people really going to come to me as a therapist and me know how to help and serve this person in the best way? Because I think I had a lot of fear at the beginning that I would harm somebody because I was inexperienced, or because I didn't have the tools that I thought I needed to be a good therapist. But I think at the end of the day, like being a good therapist is just, it feels like being a good person. And so learning that being a therapist means like having relationships with people and getting people comfortable and then helping them with the skills that I just had. So those have been sort of the biggest roadblocks for me. Um, how do you advocate for mental health outside of your profession? Are there ways that you bring being a mental health professional to the world? And let's start with Dr. Essence.
I love this question. And this is because this is a part of my like heart that I was like, okay, this is something that I have to do. If I'm going into mental health, it can't just be like a 9 to 5. I have to do this other places. And I think one of the biggest things was starting at home. And when I say at home, not necessarily like my parents and my sisters, but like the people that are right around me. My friends kind of make fun of me because I'm like telling everybody, like, you need a therapist, you need a therapist. Let me talk about my experience in therapy. Everybody should go to therapy. Here's why. And I think just really trying to normalize it within the people that are around me has made an impact because at least we're having those conversations. And I think even like on social media, that's been something that I know that some people have reached out to me and been like, wow, when you talk about this on social media, it makes it feel like it's normal. This is a real thing that people go through. And so just sharing, when I follow a lot of Instagram therapists, so every once in a while I'll just kind of share things or ask questions to my followers to just make it something that we talk about more frequently. I also think there's places where there's stigma And those are in communities that I'm a part of. So I know that there's mental health stigma in the Black community, there's mental health stigma in the church. And these are two areas where I find myself. And so I make it a point to talk about mental health, to talk about my own mental health, to talk about the work that I do and educate and advocate for people in those spaces where maybe it wouldn't be as like visible. I think about a month ago, I had the opportunity to speak to a congregation about mental health, about like anxiety and depression, and that never happens at churches. And so I was like, this is a really cool opportunity. And so just trying to make it known that that's a thing that people can do, I think is also just the first step is visibility. Those are some of the things that I'm doing and trying to continue doing.
Awesome. Uh, Dr. Regina?
Thank you. I appreciate you for calling me doctor, but I am master's level. um, but actually, I'm an activist, and so a lot of my activism and organizing has been pushing for people to be more raise awareness, advocating as well as being outspoken about the fact that mental illness is part of our culture, trauma is part of our culture, and we need to be more open to people, more understanding to people. I also do poetry and utilize poetry as an opportunity to recognize that it's a way to build resilience. It's a way to understand, to do a lot more of self-care and also to bond and connect with community. So those are some of the areas in which I've done it. And I'm also part of a political party. And so as part of our political party, we do want to start implementing um, different aspects of things to be more aware and more understanding of mental health, because politically the space just has not been historically there, especially for underrepresented and silenced communities.
Dr. Dixon?
Yeah, so lots and lots of ways. I sometimes I'm doing the most all the time, and there's a term I just heard this past year called John Henryism, which, to make a long story short, is don't burn yourself out, don't set yourself on fire to warm someone else, essentially, right? So I struggle with that every day, but the big things that I do: entrepreneurship, so teach people how to start their own practices, how to run their own practices successfully. And then I also do a lot of just community speaking, because when it comes to the financing of mental health care, I always say, you pay for what you value what you pay for. And when you look at our society, when you look at any downtown and any city in this country, you see pillars to finance, you see pillars to oil and gas, or to medicine or tech. But what you don't see are pillars to mental health. And I'm not advocating that we go and build a whole bunch of mental health buildings, but what I'm saying is we have to be honest with ourselves that we as a society do not financially value mental health. And so we need to have a reckoning of sorts. And so I spend a lot of time in community meetings and board meetings, speaking about mental health, and that if you're going to be serious about being a mental health advocate, you have to have a line item in the budget, right? And you should pay your therapist, and that insurance company should not have a disparate policy for therapists. So that's one of the reasons why I advocate for direct pay. I want every person to have enough money in their pocket to pay their therapist directly. So I spend a lot of time talking about financial equity and financial restoration. And then I also sing, as just today, my voice is bad, but I also sing in a men's chorus in Dallas, which is down the street, but from Fort Worth. But we make sure to incorporate mental health into our performances and into our email marketing, and so that we know that mental health is really important.
Yeah, I think for me, one of the biggest places that I advocate for mental health is like within myself, and then sort of like what Dr. Essence was saying, like my circle of friends, and making sure that, using the skills that I'm learning as a therapist, using them not only on myself, because I want to make sure, one, they're like legitimate things and, they're tried and true. And two, just because like I feel like going to grad school is so hard, and I feel like had I not been doing sort of those self-care things for myself, I would not be able to go out and advocate for other people. Like I would be no good to anybody because I wouldn't be good to myself. And so that's one big way that I've been sort of trying to advocate as like an example of like, here's what going to therapy and being on my self-care and being, learning these skills that I've learned in therapy, how that helps me in the real world. And then also, I think just social media, so being a part of Black and Mental Health, that has really propelled the advocacy work that I thought I would be able to do. Like, it is beyond my wildest dreams, like being a part of Black and Mental Health. And so I think those are some of the ways that being in mental health has helped me advocate outside of the field to other people. What advice would you give somebody who is interested in going into the mental health field? And what advice would you give them to enter the field, to be sustained in the field, those sorts of things? So, Dr. Dixon, we're going to start with you.
Speaking from the psychiatrist perspective, I'd say do it. We need more psychiatrists, especially psychiatrists of color. And so medical school, there are more medical schools opening all the time. And most medical schools that I know of want to have a diverse applicant pool, and they're also looking for a well-rounded person. So it's less about just your MCAT score or your GPA and more about who are you and what are you contributing to society. And so, but the thing is, you have to believe it's possible. So I'm going to encourage you to try. There's no harm in applying. And then recognize that we are a team. So every facet of the mental health infrastructure is really important. So from psychiatrists to therapists to counselors to techs, behavioral techs to BCBAs, there is a spot for you. No matter which way you go, connecting either through Twitter or LinkedIn or other networks is just really, really important.
Ms. Stone Grover?
Thank you. I would say that the gaslighting that we have experienced as we've continued to go through school and learn and build our own abilities to go and move forward is just that. It's not real. So believe in yourself and trust yourself and find what you need to feel strong and capable of achieving what you see before you. And there's so many people here to help you that you do not need to feel alone. So find your support, reach out to people and build those relationships, because that's what's going to keep you moving forward.
I would say for me, two things. The first one would be figure out I call it like your why, and why you're doing it. There has to be something to fall back on the days that you fail a test or the days that you're like, never mind, I don't want to do this anymore. I can't remember how many times that I like called home to my parents and I was like, you know what, never mind, I'm good. Like, I don't want to do this anymore. This is too much. And because I had talked about why I wanted to do this so bad, my circle was able to say, but remember the families you want to help, remember the kids you want to help, remember the representation that you are, if you do this. And that was enough to get me back on the horse and keep me going through all of those difficult days. So that would be my first piece of advice, is figure out why you actually want to do it so that you have something to keep pushing you forward. And then my second piece of advice would be to be genuine and be yourself. I think in academia in general, it can be really tempting to put on like a persona or come across as a person that you're not. And that's simply like not sustainable. It's really hard to be fake all the time. And it takes your whole life, like the training aspect of it, the school part, like you have to be in it all the way. And so being able to be genuine, be true to yourself, bring all of you to the table, not just the pieces that look good or that are acceptable by others, allows you to be able to really show up as your full self all the time. And then coupled with that purpose, it makes it a lot easier to stay in it.
I think one other piece of advice I would give is find like your people in the field, like find support in the field. Something that I think really helped me on the days when I was like really struggling in grad school was like reaching out to people on Twitter, reaching out to people within like the extended grad school network. So people who are getting PhDs, maybe in chemistry or maybe in some other field that weren't necessarily in clinical psychology, but were in, similar situations of like grad school's really hard, and help me, maybe ruminate with them a little bit, like, oh my gosh, this is the hardest thing I've ever done. But then also help push me to be like, okay, this is hard and you're able to do this. And so finding support is like the number one piece of advice I can give you, because I feel like there's like that quote about like if you want to go far, like you need people around you, like you cannot go far alone. That's a bad butchering of that quote, but that's the part I remember of it. So the next question is, are there any things that you wish you had known before going into the space that you're in mental health? Um, let's start with Dr. Dixon.
Yeah, so the one that jumps out at me the absolute most, I love my mom and dad, and they are wonderful. But the thing that I wish I had known is that they would lie to me, because they told me that if you work hard enough, any and everything will come to you. And that was a lie, because I've been, excuse my French, working my ass off, and doing lots of different things, being the best at everything. Ta, 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 ta. But one of the problems is, I operate in a system that doesn't always respect me or appreciate me, or frankly, hates me for the color of my skin or for who I am, right? And so, yeah, I wish I had known that so that I could be more mindful and purposeful about the activities that I did and the people that I was around. It took me a really long time, and lots of hours in therapy and seeing my therapist to kind of work through my trauma to figure out who I am and where I'm going. And so it was a very powerful lesson to learn, and I'm glad I learned it.
Miss Regina?
That is a wonderful question. So I honestly did not know that the way that psychology and therapy is treated is that you do kind of have to wear a lot of hats. And that there is kind of went to find the niche and then to like maintain the niche. There's a lot of hats that go there too. So I think when I had realized a lot of the people I know who love what we do, I apologize for my camera, um, have a tendency to love it so much that they'll work 7 days a week, and work nonstop. And they're instructing and teaching and doing speaker engagements and have a podcast. And I think it's beautiful that we love and dedicate ourselves to our fields. But I just would like us to take more time to set some more boundaries and some more limits.
I think it can be really hard when you are in programs that are very evaluative, which is graduate school. And I think one of the things I wish I would have maybe not known but realized is that you will not have everyone's approval ever. And also, you don't need it. I think that there was a lot of times that I was so upset that somebody didn't like me, or somebody didn't like what I was talking about, or they weren't interested, or they didn't think it was as cool as I thought it was, or anything like that. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Um, and I think that really getting through to say, like, okay, for my dissertation defense, I need 2 out of 3 people. So there can be one person that's a hater. It doesn't matter because I only need 2. And a lot of those milestones, you only need to show that you're like good enough, that you're doing the work and everything like that. But people don't have to like you for you to get your degree. And the people that will like you when you come out, when you're a professional, when you're a therapist, they'll find you, because you're going to have something that they like. And ultimately, that's what it's about. So those 5 years or whatever get through it, and then it's over. And then people that like you will come to you, and the people that don't won't, and that's okay.
Wow, that's like spot on advice that I could have used my first year because I went through a lot of just like, why don't these people like me here? And then I sort of have learned by experience that not everybody has to like you in the program. I think one of the main things I wish I had known is just how many steps there really are to becoming like a psychologist or becoming a therapist. There are so many, like, I feel like in undergrad, they're like, just get to grad school, it'll be okay. And then in grad school, they're like, just get to internship, then it's all good. And then you're at internship, they're like, oh yeah, now you need to do a postdoc. And all of these things cost money, and you need to figure out how to pay to go to these interviews. I just wish I had known all of the money and the time and all of the steps that it would have taken. Because although I think I probably still would have done it, I just sometimes I feel very blindsided. I'm like, man, another step has popped up. Like, when is it going to end? Like, I need to figure out how I'm going to get money to, survive at this point. They're like, yeah, well, also now you have to pay for flights to internship interviews, but good luck. Like, we're already not paying you anything in grad school, but like, you have to figure out how to get to these places. I wish I had known that. And I wish I had just known how like leaning on people isn't necessarily a weakness. I think I spent a lot of time my first year trying to avoid getting help for things because I had had professors basically tell me I was incompetent, like day two of me being in grad school. And so I was like, okay, well, now I'm not going to ask for help at all. And so I wish I had not had that experience of like asking for help isn't frowned upon. And just because I had this one professor, or these two professors who were basically haters from day one of me being there, that doesn't mean that I can't ask other people for help when I need it. Okay, so our last question is, what does being Black in mental health mean to you, and how do you feel like you will carry the mission of being Black in mental health forward? Let's start with Dr. Essence.
Um, I wish you didn't start with me because I don't have time to think about my answer. But I think for me, so I'm biracial, and I think that I'm so blessed in the way that I was raised and the people that I've met and encountered in my life to see that there's a gap in the in between, between people that are Black and people that are white or other races, just minorities and majority culture. And I think that for me, being Black means that and having privilege as a biracial woman means that I have a responsibility to take accountability for, my privilege, but also speak up for people that don't have a voice. And I think that that's been the biggest thing for me is using my position in mental health, using my position as a doctor, using my position as a therapist, and being in rooms that not everybody can be in, that I need to speak up. And I think throughout my life, there's always going to be a call to, you know, make lives better for people that look like me, people that look like my family. And that's like a no brainer for me, like, of course. But I think that the biggest piece with reaching this milestone in my life is that taking responsibility and ownership over the position that I have in order to be a voice for people that don't get to say what they need or what is best for them.
Miss Regina?
That is a beautiful question. So being in mental health for me is a foundational aspect because mental health has so many different pivotal and found like just powerful aspects in our society. Mental health is involved in almost every single aspect, including the political space, the marketing space, the entrepreneurial space. And so to be able to have the insight that I have and to be able to move through the different spaces has given me the ability to recognize and understand the same way that Dr. Essence mentioned, speaking up for others, being empowered by others, and also bringing some of the empowerment that comes to the activist spaces, the literature spaces, the artistic spaces. And for that empowers me and has allowed me to kind of carve out the space for myself.
And I would throw out there. So I love being Black because Black people know how to make a dollar out of 15 cents, and that creativity and that, I don't know, that passion is just, it is unparalleled, I think, anywhere. And so being Black in the mental health space now in this moment feels very serendipitous because between, you know, mass mandates and Supreme Court rulings and voting rights violations and everything, I think that Black mental health clinicians are the future of this country. And it's hard for me to describe in less than, you know, 10 seconds, but there's a reckoning that is coming that Black mental health clinicians will be at the forefront of to help guide us through the trauma and the hurt and the isms that we've all survived. And so I think we are at I'm lucky to be alive right now. There's something about this moment right now. And to Dr. Essence's point, being able to sit in those boardrooms where I'm surrounded by people who don't look like me, and not that I'm trying to represent the whole culture, but I can speak from experience. I can do the whole code switching thing, which is not always a good thing. But I can help be the voice for folks who aren't in the room. And so yeah, I'm very excited to be Black. And I you know, 10, 20 years ago I wouldn't have said that because I didn't know any different. I went to a predominantly white institution, and I didn't realize my power and my seasoning, if you will. So I'm super glad to be alive in this moment.
I think for me, Black in mental health is just like so expansive, like sort of like what you were saying, Dr. Dixon. Like it's so hard to picture because it just like it feels like filling up of like a room with like cotton candy or something. Like it's just expanding so quickly. And so I think like it feels really good to be in this moment. And I think for me, being Black in mental health means advocating for more people to come to the table, helping people get to the tables, like, you know, reviewing application materials for people applying to graduate school, talking with people about what being a therapist is like, what how I got to this space. It looks like that lifting as you climb, and then also as we're climbing, like seeing the vastness of what Black therapists are doing. I fully believe that Black therapists and Black people in mental health are like going to change the world, and it just feels like, wow, like this person over here is doing this cool thing in this niche space for Black people in their mental health. This person's doing self-care things for the Black people in their mental health. It feels so right and just feels like warm fuzzies. Like I get goosebumps thinking about it because like it feels sort of like in this moment right now, things are sort of changing for the future of Black people and their mental health, and it feels really good to be a part of. Okay, so the last thing I want everyone to do is go around and talk about where people can find you, like on social media or if you have a website, and those sorts of things. So we'll start with Miss Regina.
Thank you. And thank you so much for allowing me to be here. I can be found at freefire.com. That's FREE, fire, PHIRE.com. And I'm also Free Fire on Instagram and Twitter.
Awesome. Dr. Dixon?
Yeah, the best way of finding me is my website. So it's www.drbrinDixon.com. And from there, that'll take you to my LinkedIn page. I run 3 different companies, so you can find those companies. And you can also find my Twitter handle because I would love to talk to you.
Dr. Essence?
You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. And it's just at ESSENCERIVERS. So just my name.
Okay, lastly, I'm Tanisha. You can find me on most social medias at TDOTRENAE, and that's T. Renee, my name. And then you can also find me over on YouTube at Renee's Corner. It's RENAE' Corner, CORNER. Sorry, I can't spell that on the fly. And so thanks so much for being here. We really appreciate it. Please connect with any of us. Also, Manny, Jade, do you want to tell people where to find you?
Yes. So you can contact me at mannygarcia.com or on Twitter or Instagram. It's at Manny Jade Garcia.
All right. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate all the panelists for being here. And we'll see you guys at the next mental health or Black and mental health events coming up for the rest of the week. Bye.